Tonight we journey back over 1,000 years, to the heart of a sprawling, sun-baked city perched between two seas and two continents. You won't find cars here, or the hum of electricity. Instead, you'll hear the distant call to prayer from a newly built Hagia Sophia, the clatter of hooves on cobblestones, and the murmur of a dozen languages in crowded markets. You are not a tourist, but a resident, and your life is one of calloused hands, aching muscles, and the patient, meticulous creation of beauty that will, against all odds, outlive empires. You are an apprentice mosaicist in the great city of Constantinople, and the path ahead is one of dust, glitter, and bone-deep exhaustion. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sound that wakes you isn't an alarm, but a sharp, percussive rapping on your door, a sound as regular and unforgiving as the sunrise you cannot yet see. It's the master's eldest son, Leo, making his rounds through the warren of small cells housing the apprentices. You jolt from a sleep so deep it feels like drowning, your body protesting before your mind is fully conscious. Up comes the gruff command from the other side of the wood, followed by the receding scuff of his sandals. No good morning, no gentle encouragement. Just up. You swing your legs over the side of your simple cot, the straw stuffing crunching in protest. The air in your tiny, windowless room is cool and still smells faintly of the lime plaster you mixed yesterday. You fumble in the near-total darkness for your tunic, a coarse, undyed woolen thing that scratches your skin. You pull it over your head, the familiar itch a part of the morning ritual. Next, you wrap your belt, a length of sturdy rope, around your waist, tucking a small, blunt knife into it, your only personal tool. Your feet find your sandals, their leather soles worn thin from months of use. You don't need light for any of this. Your hands know the motions, your body knows the space. This is your entire world. A cot, a small chest for your spare tunic, and a chamber pot. Luxuries are for other people. You push your door open and step out into the courtyard. The sky is just beginning to lighten from black to a deep, indigo blue, the stars fading like dying embers. A sliver of a moon hangs over the high walls of the workshop compound. You join the shuffling line of other boys, a dozen or so, ranging in age from 12 to 18. You're somewhere in the middle, no longer the new, homesick child, but not yet one of the senior apprentices who get to handle the gold. Yawning, you fall into step behind Niketas, a lanky boy from Thessaloniki who can already sketch a knee-perfect freehand circle. Ahead of him is plump, forever grumbling Alexandros, who misses his father's bakery with a passion you can almost smell. You trudge towards the latrine, a necessary and unpleasant first stop. Historians still argue whether the famed Byzantine source system, the Cloaca Maxima of Constantinople, was a marvel of public health or a breeding ground for pestilence that occasionally bubbled over into plague. This morning, you're firmly in the latter camp. The smell is a physical presence, a thick cocktail of human waste and the sharp, astringent lime used to try and control it. You hold your breath, do what you must, and escape back into the marginally fresher air of the courtyard as quickly as possible. Next is the well. You take your turn hauling up the heavy, dripping bucket, the rough hemp rope burning the already calloused pads of your fingers. You splash icy water on your face, the shock finally banishing the last remnants of sleep. The water is clean, at least, drawn from one of the city's great underground cisterns. You drink deeply from your cupped hands, the cold a blessing in your dry throat. Breakfast is a single piece of coarse, dark bread, handed to you by the master's stoic wife, Maria. It's dense, chewy, and tastes faintly of the barley and rye it's made from. There is no butter, no oil, no honey. This is not a meal for pleasure, it's fuel. You eat it standing up, chewing methodically, watching the sky slowly turn a pale, watery gold over the rooftops. As you eat, you glance towards the workshop, a large, barn-like structure with a high, sloped roof designed to let in the maximum amount of north light. That's your real home, the place where you will spend every moment of daylight until the sun disappears. It's also the source of a low, constant, almost musical sound. The tick, tick, tick of small hammers tapping against hard stone cutters. The senior apprentices are already at work, preparing the tesserae for the day. The sound is both a promise and a threat. A promise of the beauty being created, cube by tiny cube. A threat of the relentless, monotonous labor that defines your existence. That coarse bread you eating? It's often used as a primitive plate, a trencher to soak up stews and juices. But in a workshop like yours, it sometimes has another, more artistic purpose. Apprentices would often practice sketching designs or testing the angle of their cutting strikes on a soft piece of bread before moving on to expensive stone or glass. So, that breakfast is also your first sketchpad of the day. Leo claps his hands twice, the sound cracking through the morning air like a whip. The brief, quiet moment is over. The line of apprentices straightens. You toss the last crust of your bread into your mouth and wipe your hands on your tunic. The master, Theophilos, is now standing in the doorway of the workshop, a broad, imposing silhouette against the glowing interior. He says nothing, merely surveys his flock. You feel his gaze sweep over you, and you instinctively stand a little taller, trying to look alert, capable, worthy. This is the moment of judgment, where he decides who will do what, who is worthy of a slightly more complex task, and who will spend the day on the grinding wheel. You take a deep breath, the city air now carrying the distinct, dusty smell of crushed stone and the metallic tang of freshly cut glass. The day has truly begun. The master, Theophilos, remains a statue in the doorway, his gaze a physical weight as you and the other apprentices file past him into the workshop. You keep your eyes down, fixed on the worn stone of the threshold, but you feel his scrutiny like a hot sun on the back of your neck. He doesn't need to speak to command absolute attention. His presence is a lesson in itself. The air inside the workshop is thick and familiar, a potent mixture of stone dust, lime plaster, and the faint, acrid scent of the glue used to fix the cartoons. It's a smell that clings to your tunic, your hair, the inside of your nose long after you've left for the night. It's the smell of your life. You find your spot, a cleared space on a long, scarred wooden bench near the back, well away from the current focal point of the workshop, the massive half-finished apse mosaic of the Archangel Michael. The wall is a giant puzzle, its lower sections a breathtaking cascade of color and light, the Archangel's robes a symphony of deep blue and brilliant white tesserae, while the upper portions are still just a ghostly outline sketched in charcoal and red ochre on the fresh, grey mortar. The senior apprentices are already on the scaffolding, their bodies contorted into impossible angles as they work on the angel's wings. You watch one of them, a young man named Demetrios who has hands as steady as a surgeon's, select a single, glittering gold tesserae with his tweezers, dip its base in the waiting mortar, and press it into place with a soft, final tap. The tiny cube catches the morning light flooding through the high windows and winks, a single star in a nascent heaven. Your own duties are far more terrestrial. The master's shadow falls over you. He doesn't look at your face, but at your hands, which are resting on the bench. The small t, he says, his voice a low rumble, like stones grinding together deep underground. The batch from the shipment last week. It is inconsistent, full of bubbles and fissures. Sort it. The clear, deep blues for the Virgin's robe we will begin next month. The lighter, streaky pieces can be used for distant mountains. The flawed, the fractured, the impure. He finally lifts his eyes to yours, and they are the color of flint. You will learn to see the purpose in the broken. There is no waste here. Only misplaced intention. And with that, he moves on, leaving you with a heavy wooden crate filled with chunks of rough, cobalt blue glass, small t, specially imported from the workshops of Venice at great expense. This is your test. It seems simple, mindless even, but you know it is anything but. The master isn't just judging your ability to sort colors. He's judging your patience, your discernment, your understanding of the hierarchy of materials. A single poorly chosen tesserae, a piece with a hidden fracture, could pop out of the mortar in a decade, leaving a pockmark on the face of a saint. Your failure would literally be set in stone, or in this case, glass and mortar, for 1,000 years. You heft a chunk of the blue glass. It's heavier than it looks, cool and smooth against your palm. You hold it up to the light, squinting. Inside, you can see the tiny, trapped air bubbles the master mentioned, and a faint, milky streak running through its core like a frozen river. This is the impure one. You set it aside in a growing pile of rejects. The next piece is a deep, uniform, glorious azure, clear and solid. This is for the Virgin's robe. You place it with reverence on a soft cloth on your right. Then comes a piece that is neither. It's a lighter blue, shot through with wisps of white, like clouds in a summer sky. Distant mountains. You place it on a separate cloth. This is the rhythm of your morning. Lift, examine, judge, place. Lift, examine, judge, place. Your world shrinks to the size of a blue glass cube. You learn to read the light passing through it, to feel for the subtle telltale roughness of a hidden crack with your thumb. A mainstream historical fact you're living right now. The deep blue color of this very small tea often came from cobalt oxide, a pigment so expensive and treasured that its trade routes were state secrets, and its value was sometimes compared to silver. The batch you're sorting represents a significant portion of the workshop's wealth. As you work, you can't help but sneak glances at the master. He moves through the workshop like a surgeon through a hospital, his hands, scarred and nicked from a lifetime of handling sharp stone and glass, constantly in motion. He stops to correct the angle of a tesserae a senior apprentice is setting, his fingers gently guiding the younger man's hand. He kneels to examine the consistency of a batch of mortar, rubbing a pinch between his fingers and sniffing it. He is a man who speaks more through action than words, and every action is precise, intentional. You once saw him work for an entire day on a single square foot of mosaic, a section of a peacock's tail, using dozens of subtly different green and blue tesserae to create a feathery, iridescent effect that seemed to shimmer even in the dim candlelight. He is a perfectionist, and his standards are, you are convinced, divinely inspired and humanly impossible. A rumor you heard from Nicetas, who heard it from a sailor in the harbor. He claimed that the red glass used for the robes of martyrs sometimes got its color from a secret ingredient, real, powdered gold. You love the idea that these holy figures, resplendent in their crimson, are literally illuminated by precious metal, a hidden treasure shining from within. It makes the tedious sorting feel like a tiny part of alchemy. The pile of rejected, flawed blue glass grows. These pieces will not be thrown away. They will be crushed in the giant stone mortar and pestle in the corner, becoming the raw material for new glass, or even used as aggregate in plaster. There is no waste, the master had said. You look at the pile of broken, bubbly, impure glass, and for a moment, you feel a strange kinship with it. You, too, are flawed, full of bubbles of laziness and fissures of impatience. You can only hope that the master, or some divine craftsman, can see a purpose for you as well, that you are not just destined to be crushed and recycled, but to be placed carefully, intentionally, into a grander design. The master's shadow has long since moved on, leaving you with the silent, weighty judgment of the blue glass. Your fingers are now dusted with a fine, azure powder, and the sorted piles on the cloths before you look like a strange, crystalline geography, a deep ocean, a pale sky, and a jagged mountain range of rejects. The rhythm of lift, examine, judge, place has become a meditation, your lower back a dull, constant ache from hunching over the bench. Just as you think your world cannot possibly shrink any further, a new shadow falls over your work. It's Leo, the master's son, his expression perpetually caught between a smirk and a scowl. Theophilos says you're done with the small t. Good. The cartoon for the lower border is ready. The pomegranates. He jerks his head towards the far wall, where two of the senior apprentices are carefully unrolling a large sheet of parchment. You'll be preparing the tesserae for the red seeds, the granites and the red marbles. No glass. We need the granular texture. This is a promotion, however slight. Moving from sorting raw material to actually preparing the tiny cubes, the tesserae, that will become the image itself. This is stone whispering. You nod, not trusting yourself to speak, and follow him to a different part of the workshop, an area dominated by heavy, solid tables and the distinct, sharp smell of fractured rock. Here, the musical tick you heard from outside becomes a loud, percussive crack and crunch. This is where the raw stone is broken down into the language of mosaics. A large, woven basket sits at the foot of the table, filled with rough chunks of stone. Some are a deep, blood-red marble veined with white, others a speckled, rosy granite. Your tools are laid out with a grim simplicity, a heavy, blunt-ended hammer known as a martellina, a smaller, pointed hammer, and a hardy, a sharp, upright chisel fixed firmly into the table itself. The process is brutally straightforward, yet it requires a touch so delicate it feels like a contradiction. You are not smashing the stone, you are persuading it. You select a chunk of the red marble, about the size of your fist. You hold it against the point of the hardy, positioning it not where you want it to split, but where the stone's own internal grain and fissures suggest it wants to split. This is the first lesson you learn the hard way, with a palm full of shallow cuts from flying shards. You don't fight the stone, you listen to it. You take the martellina in your other hand, its wooden handle smooth and dark with the oil from 1,000 previous hands. You take a breath, and bring the hammer down in a short, sharp, controlled tap. Crack. The stone cleaves, not into dust, but into two smaller, roughly cube-shaped pieces. Not perfect, but a good start. You examine the fresh face of one piece. It's a beautiful, rich red, with a complex, swirling pattern of white. This will make a perfect pomegranate seed. You take the smaller, pointed hammer and begin to nibble at the edges, tapping gently, shaving off tiny, irregular flakes until the cube is more or less square, about the size of your thumbnail. It will never be perfectly uniform, that's the point. The slight variations in size and the uneven surface are what will catch the light in 1,000 different ways, giving the mosaic its vibrant, shimmering life. A perfectly flat, machine-cut tesserae would create a dead, dull surface. The imperfection is the source of the magic. You place the finished red cube into a new clay bowl. It winks up at you, a tiny, bloody star. Then you pick up another rough stone. Crack. Tap, tap, tap. Another cube. The process is hypnotic, a cycle of controlled violence and patient refinement. Your shoulders begin to burn from the repetitive motion. A sliver of stone flies up and nicks your cheek, a familiar, stinging sensation. You wipe the tiny bead of blood away with a dusty sleeve and keep going. Crack. Tap, tap, tap. You learned from old Georgios, the nearly blind apprentice who's been here since the master was a boy. The best mosaicists, he claims, can identify the quarry a piece of marble came from just by tasting it. You tried it once, surreptitiously licking a piece of green Thessalian marble. It just tasted like dust and disappointment, but you like the romantic idea of it, that the stone holds a secret flavor of its distant homeland. Historians still argue whether the specific sizes of tesserae were strictly regulated by guild rules or were left to the artistic discretion of the master craftsman, based on the viewing distance of the final piece. Watching the senior apprentices on the scaffold, you see the truth is probably both. The tesserae for the archangel's face, high up in the apse, are slightly larger than those for the intricate patterns on the hem of his robe, which would be seen from closer quarters. Your pomegranate seeds, destined for a lower border, are a medium size, small enough for detail, but large enough to be cut quickly. Everything has a logic, a purpose. The pile of rough stone in the basket seems to mock you, barely diminished after an hour of work. Your bowl of finished red cubes, however, is slowly filling, a growing heap of crimson gravel. Each one represents a single moment of focus, a single impact of hammer on stone. You think of the millions upon millions of tesserae that make up the mosaics in the great churches of the city, each one hand-cut by an apprentice like you, each one placed by a craftsman now long dead. The scale of it is humbling, and for a moment, the weight of the hammer feels like the weight of history itself. You are a tiny, insignificant part of a vast, beautiful, back-breaking tradition. Crack. Tap, tap, tap. Another red seed joins the pile. The pomegranate, symbol of resurrection and eternal life, is being built one aching muscle at a time. Your world has become a rhythm of sharp cracks and the accumulating weight of red cubes in a clay bowl. The granular dust of crushed marble and granite coats your throat, a dry, mineral taste that water from the well does little to quench. Just as the hypnotic repetition threatens to lull you into a trance, a shift in the workshop's energy pulls you back. The senior apprentices are descending from the scaffolding like spiders from a web, their movements brisk with purpose. Leo claps his hands, the sound cutting through the percussive symphony of stone cutting. The border. Everyone who isn't cutting, to the wall. The ghost needs flesh. You set down your martellina with a sense of relief, your fingers stiff and throbbing. The ghost is the cartoon, the full-scale drawing that has been transferred to the waiting plaster bed on the lower section of the wall. You follow the other junior apprentices to the site, a long, sweeping curve of the apse's base. The senior, Demetrios, is already there, kneeling before a section of the wall that is no longer bare stone, but a vast, pale grey expanse of fresh, damp plaster. Sketched onto its surface in bold, short charcoal lines is the outline of a lush, intricate pattern, twisting vines, broad leaves, and the plump, round forms of split pomegranates, their skins rendered in outline, their interiors a blank canvas waiting for the seeds you've just been preparing. This is the moment the drawing ceases to be an idea on parchment and starts its transformation into an eternal object. The process is both simple and terrifyingly final. A senior apprentice named Isaac, who has a talent for draftsmanship, takes a stylus, a sharpened piece of bone, and begins to go over the charcoal lines, scoring them deeply into the soft plaster. The line is now permanent. There is no erasing it. If he makes a mistake, a whole section of plaster will have to be chiseled out and reapplied, setting the work back by a day or more. You watch his hand, utterly steady, the bone point tracing the elegant curve of a vine. He doesn't hesitate. He knows the design as if it were his own heartbeat. Once a section of the design is scored, another apprentice follows with a small pot of red ochre mixed with water, using a fine brush to paint over the incised lines, making them stand out vividly against the pale grey plaster. The ghost gains color, its bones becoming more defined. The pomegranates you saw as empty outlines now have their internal structures drawn in, the chambers, the thin, white pith, all waiting for their jewel-like seeds. It's a map, and you are one of the cartographers who will help fill it in. Your own role in this phase is humble. but essential. You are a plaster boy. You stand by with a bucket of clean water and a sponge, and your job is to keep the edges of the working area moist. The plaster, a mix of lime and sand, has a limited working time before it begins to set. If it dries too much, the tesserae won't adhere properly. So, as Isaac scores and the painter paints, you gently dab the edges of the fresh plaster with your damp sponge, maintaining the perfect level of humidity, wet enough to be sticky, but not so wet that it dissolves the scored lines. It's a nervous, delicate dance. Too much water and you'll wash away the precious cartoon. Too little and you'll compromise the entire day's work. You feel the senior apprentice's eyes on you, a silent pressure more potent than any shouted command. A mainstream historical fact that is now a tangible reality before you. The use of these full-scale preparatory drawings, or cartoons, is why so many Byzantine mosaics across different churches share such similar stylistic traits and compositions. The cartoons themselves were valuable assets, often traced and retraced, carried from workshop to workshop, a portable library of sacred imagery. The Archangel Michael taking shape on the wall above you is likely a direct descendant of a drawing made a century ago. As you work, you notice a small, almost hidden detail that Isaac is scoring near the base of a vine. A tiny, coiled serpent, its mouth open as if to taste a pomegranate. It's a strange, almost mischievous addition to the otherwise purely decorative and symbolic fruit. You once heard from a talkative monk delivering pigments was that some mosaicists, as a quiet act of rebellion or personal signature, would include such pagan or apocryphal symbols hidden in the overwhelming Christian narrative of the main image. A frog for fertility, a snail for the slow passage of time, a serpent for wisdom, or for temptation. You wonder if the master approved this, or if Isaac is taking a quiet, artistic liberty, knowing that few will ever notice it down here in the shadows, near the floor. Historians still argue whether these hidden, subversive elements were conscious acts of personal expression by individual artisans or merely the unconscious persistence of much older, pre-Christian artistic traditions, bubbling up like a forgotten spring. Watching Isaac's focused face as he incises the serpent's forked tongue, you feel like you're witnessing a secret. It's a tiny crack in the immense, holy edifice you are building, a glimpse of a man, not just a craftsman. You carefully sponge the area around the little serpent, ensuring its ghostly form will be preserved long enough to receive its own skin of stone and glass, a secret for the ages, or at least until the next time the wall is replastered. The ghost is taking shape, and it has a few surprises in its heart. The ghost is fully fleshed out in stark red lines against the damp grey field, a detailed map awaiting its treasure. The air in the workshop changes again, growing thicker, more focused. The senior apprentices take their positions along the wall, each before a specific section of the cartoon. They are the setters, the elite, the ones who will perform the final, alchemical act of turning colored stones into divine image. But before they can begin, the canvas itself must be made ready. The scored and painted lines are just the beginning. Now, the wall must be fed. This is where you come in. Your brief tenure as a plaster boy has granted you a promotion to the mortar bench. This is not a task for the careless or the weak-stomached. In the corner of the workshop, away from the precious cartoons and the sorted tesserae, stands a large, shallow stone trough and a heavy wooden paddle that looks like it belongs on a galley ship. Your job, under the supervision of the perpetually scowling Leo, is to mix the nucleus, the second, setting layer of mortar that will actually hold the cubes for centuries. The recipe, Leo barks, pointing to a series of clay jars and a heap of sand. 2 parts sand, 1 part lime. Not by volume, by weight. You know the scales. You do. You move to the large, bronze-hanging scales and begin the laborious process of weighing out the coarse, sharp sand, pouring it into the trough. Then comes the lime, which is stored in a sealed jar to keep it from reacting with the air. As you open it, a puff of white powder escapes, and you get a lungful of the acrid, choking dust. It burns your nostrils and the back of your throat, and you cough, your eyes watering. Leo smirks. Breathe deep. It builds character. The lime is slaked lime, made by heating limestone in a kiln until it becomes quicklime and then carefully adding water. It's a dangerous, volatile process you've only heard stories about. The master buys his lime pre-slaked from specialists outside the city walls. You add the lime to the sand and begin to mix them dry with the paddle, creating a pale, homogeneous powder. Now for the water. You add it slowly, from a controlled pitcher, while Leo watches your every move like a hawk. Too much water, and the mortar will be soupy and weak, unable to hold the weight of the tesserae. Too little, and it will be crumbly and dry, failing to adhere. You heave the paddle, dragging the mixture, feeling the resistance grow as the water is absorbed. The dry powder becomes a thick, gritty paste, the sound a wet, sucking sloop with every stroke of the paddle. This is brute force labor. The muscles in your arms, back, and shoulders scream in protest, already fatigued from a morning of hammering stone. Sweat drips from your brow, cutting clean trails through the dust on your face and plopping into the mortar mix. You wonder, grimly, if a tiny part of you will now also be immortalized in the wall. The mixture slowly transforms, becoming smoother, more cohesive. You have to achieve the perfect peanut butter consistency, as a modern builder might say, thick enough to hold its shape, but plastic enough to be pressed and shaped. A mainstream historical fact you are literally sweating over. The longevity of Byzantine mosaics is owed entirely to this chemical process. The slaked lime in your trough, once mixed with water and exposed to air, begins a slow process of recarbonation. It absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and gradually turns back into solid limestone, effectively welding the tesserae to the wall in a crystalline grip that can last for millennia. You aren't just making glue, you are facilitating a slow-motion geological transformation. Finally, Leo grunts, a sound that passes for approval. He plunges his own hand into the mix, feeling its texture. It'll do. He points to a wooden hod, a trough-like container. Load it. Start with Demetrios' section. The pomegranate seeds. And don't you dare drop it. You use a trowel to carefully transfer the heavy, grey mass into the hod. It's astonishingly heavy. You heft it into your arms, your muscles trembling with the strain, and carry it with slow, deliberate steps towards the wall, terrified of stumbling and spilling a day's worth of labor onto the floor. Demetrios glances at you, then back at the wall, pointing with his trowel to a specific area, a single pomegranate fruit whose interior chambers are outlined in red. Here. A thin layer. No more than the depth of 2 tesserae. You set the hod down with a grunt of relief and take your own small trowel. You scoop up a portion of the mortar and, with a practiced flick of your wrist, spread it over a small section of the scored cartoon, smoothing it to the perfect thickness. The cold, wet plaster kisses the warm air. Old Georgios, who swore that the best mortar was mixed not just with water, but with a splash of fig juice or even a little animal blood for added strength and workability. You look at the grey, lumpy substance and can't imagine it, but you don't put it past the masters of old to have tried every possible concoction. You step back, your part done for now. Demetrios moves in, his movements fluid and economical. He dips the base of one of your blood-red marble cubes into a pot of thinner, stickier mortar, the bedding mix, and then presses it firmly into the bed you've just laid down. Tap. A single, crimson seed is born, embedded in the grey flesh of the wall. He places another, and another, following the map of the chambers, his tweezers moving with the precision of a scribe's pen. You watch, mesmerized, as the blank space on the cartoon begins to fill with glittering, stony life. The mortar you mixed with your own aching arms is now the womb for a small piece of eternity. It's a humbling, terrifying thought. You just hope you mixed it right. You stand back, your arms still vibrating from the strain of carrying the mortar, and watch Demetrios work. He is a poet of pressure, his every movement a study in controlled intention. The red marble seeds you painstakingly cut now sit in a small terracotta bowl at his side, each one a tiny, polished jewel. His tools are simple: a pair of bronze tweezers, a small wooden spatula, and a little mallet with a head of hardened leather. He doesn't just place the tesserae, he introduces them to the wall, persuading them to become part of a greater whole. He dips the base of a tesserae into the pot of sticky bedding mix, then presses it into the soft mortar bed you laid down. There's a slight squelch. He doesn't just leave it there, he gives it a slight twist with the tweezers, seating it perfectly. Then, with the leather mallet, he taps it once, a soft, definitive thwack. The sound is utterly different from the sharp crack of your hammer or the wet sloop of your paddle. It is the sound of finality. That tiny piece of rock, which you wrested from a larger stone, is now locked in place. It will be there long after your bones have turned to dust, long after the name of Demetrios has been forgotten, long after the empire itself has crumbled. The weight of that single, quiet thwack is almost too much to bear. The angle, the master's voice murmurs from behind you, making you jump. You hadn't heard him approach. He's not talking to you, but to Demetrios, though his lesson is for everyone within earshot. You are not paving a road. You are capturing light. Think of each cube as a tiny mirror. He reaches past Demetrios, his own scarred fingers gently adjusting the tweezers, tilting the next tesserae ever so slightly. This one, for the curve of the seed, it must face the window. The next, for the shadowed side, must turn away. It is the variation, the chaos within the order, that gives it life. You watch, understanding dawning. The mosaic isn't flat. It's a textured, complex surface of a million tiny, angled facets, each one placed to catch and reflect the light in a specific way. This is the secret. This is why a mosaic seems to shimmer and move, why the archangel's robe seems to flow like real silk. It's an illusion built from an immense, painstakingly orchestrated collection of fixed, inert stones. Now you, Theophilos says, and for a heart-stopping second you think he's talking to you. But his gaze is on a younger setter, a nervous boy named Lazaros who is working on the plain green leaves of the vine. A simple leaf. Show me you understand the light. Lazaros's hand trembles slightly as he picks up a tesserae of malachite green. He dips it, presses it in, and taps it. It sits flat, flush with the mortar. The master says nothing. He just looks at it, his silence a more potent criticism than any shout. Lazaros swallows hard and places another, this time remembering to angle it slightly. It's better, but still clumsy. The master lets him place 3 more before stopping him with a raised hand. Enough. You are thinking too much. Your hand must know the angle before your mind does. It must become a feeling. Again, tomorrow. He motions for Lazaros to step aside, and Demetrios smoothly moves over to take his place, his own confident taps a quiet reproach. Then, Theophilos turns his flinty gaze to you. You, the one who mixed the bed. Your mortar is acceptable. Your hands know weight and consistency. Let us see if they know delicacy. He points to the pomegranate Demetrios was working on. One small chamber of seeds is still empty. Place 1. Your mouth goes dry. The eyes of the nearby apprentices are on you. This is it. Your first tesserae on the actual mosaic, not practice on a discarded slab. You wipe your dusty hands on your tunic, leaving new streaks of gray and red. You pick up the tweezers. They feel alien and clumsy in your grip, nothing like the familiar, brutish weight of the Martellina. You select a red marble cube from the bowl, one you remember cutting. It has a tiny white vein running through it, like a lightning bolt. You dip it carefully into the bedding mix, ensuring just a tiny dot covers the base. You lean forward, your heart hammering against your ribs. The scored outline of the seed chamber seems to pulse on the wall. You press the tesserae into the soft mortar bed. It feels like pushing into cold, gritty butter. You remember the master's words about the angle. This seed is on the top curve of the pomegranate. It should catch the light. You try to twist the tweezers, to tilt the cube, but your fingers are wooden. The cube slips, sinking in too deep and at a weird, jagged angle. It looks wrong. It feels wrong. It is wrong. A hot flush of shame washes over you. You've ruined it. You've marred the perfect fruit. You wait for the master's sharp rebuke. But it doesn't come. He simply reaches out, his movements slow and deliberate. With the tip of his own tweezers, he carefully levers your misplaced cube out of the mortar, leaving a small, cube-shaped hole. He flicks the ruined tesserae into a discard bucket. The mortar forgives, he says, his voice low. But only for a moment. Try again. And this time, do not try. Just do. You take a deep, shuddering breath. You pick up another red cube. You don't think about the angle. You don't think about the master watching. You just look at the space. You feel the light from the window on your face, and you press the tesserae into the wall, giving your wrist a subtle, instinctual turn as you do. Thok. A tap with the mallet. It sits there, perfectly angled, its white vein catching the light. It is no longer a piece of rock. It is a pomegranate seed. You did it. The master gives a barely perceptible nod. Good. He turns and walks away. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Your hands are still trembling, but now it's with a heady mix of terror and exhilaration. You look at that one, perfectly placed red cube amidst the dozens set by Demetrios. It's yours. A tiny, permanent signature. Historians still argue whether apprentices were ever allowed to set tesserae on important sections of major commissions, or if their work was confined to backgrounds and borders. In this moment, you have your answer. You look at your seed, a small, crimson triumph in a sea of green leaves, and for the first time today, you smile. The quiet triumph of your single, perfectly placed tesserae still hums in your veins, a private melody against the workshop's steady percussion. You've been sent back to the mortar trough, your brief moment as a setter over, but the memory of that thok lingers on your fingertips like a ghost. You're mixing a new, smaller batch, your movements more confident now, your body understanding the recipe in a way it didn't before. The grueling labor feels less like a punishment and more like a foundation. You are building your skills just as you are building the wall, layer by patient layer. It is in this relative quiet, punctuated only by the scrape of your paddle and the distant tapping from the scaffold, that a new sound intrudes, the rhythmic, official cadence of marching feet from the courtyard outside. The sound is alien here, a noise of the outside world of power and protocol forcing its way into your dusty sanctuary. The effect on the workshop is instantaneous and profound. The tapping stops. The low murmur of conversation dies. Every apprentice freezes in place, looking towards the master. Theophilos, who was examining a newly arrived sheet of gold glass, sets it down with deliberate care. He smooths his tunic, a simple, practical gesture that suddenly seems charged with significance. He doesn't look alarmed, but his posture shifts from craftsman to courtier in the space of a heartbeat. The Archbishop's man, he says, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. Back to your work. Slowly. Show discipline, not curiosity. But of course, Curiosity is a fire in your blood. You peer towards the doorway as a man sweeps in, flanked by two lesser clerics. This is not the Archbishop himself. You've heard tales of his opulent, jewel-encrusted robes, but a senior aide, a cartophylax, the keeper of the records. He is a tall, gaunt man with a neatly trimmed grey beard and eyes that miss nothing. He wears a dark, severe robe of fine wool, but the heavy silver cross hanging from his neck and the ornate leather binder he carries scream of his authority. He is the money, the approval, the critical eye of the patron. The master bows his head slightly, a gesture of respect to the office, not necessarily the man. Cartophylax Simeon. You honor our workshop. Simeon's eyes are already scanning the wall, bypassing Theophilos as if he were a piece of furniture. The progress is acceptable, Master Theophilos. His Eminence is eager. His voice is dry, reedy, like parchment being rubbed together. The dedication of the chapel is set for the Feast of the Transfiguration. The heavenly host must be complete by then. His gaze travels up the scaffolding, over the burgeoning form of the Archangel Michael, and then down to the border where you were just working. He points a long, bony finger towards the pomegranate with your single red seed. The symbolism is correct? The pomegranate, representing the resurrection and the unity of the Church in its many seeds? We cannot have any misinterpretations. You feel a cold knot tighten in your stomach. Is he looking at your seed? Does he somehow know it was placed by an apprentice? Does its angle offend him? Theophilos doesn't even glance at it. The symbolism is pure, Your Grace. As outlined in the iconographic guide you provided. Every vine, every leaf, every seed has its purpose and its place in the divine narrative. His voice is a calm, steady rock against the cartophylax's probing tide. This is the reality of your work. It is not free art. It is theology in stone and glass. A mainstream historical fact you are witnessing play out before you. The use of religious images in Byzantium was never a simple artistic choice. It was enmeshed in the brutal iconoclast controversy that had torn the empire apart for generations. While the destruction of icons is over, for now, the shadow of that debate lingers. Every image must justify its existence, must adhere to strict doctrinal and symbolic rules, lest it be accused of idolatry. You are not just building a beautiful picture. You are constructing an orthodox argument in a visual language. Simeon nods slowly, seemingly satisfied. He turns his attention to a stack of parchment on the master's desk. The invoices for gold leaf, for the Venetian smalty, for the rare red porphyry stone that will be used for the Archangel's boots, a color reserved for the imperial family and, by extension, the celestial hierarchy. The expenses for the gold are considerable, he murmurs, his finger tracing a column of figures. The heavenly Jerusalem is paved with it, Your Grace. Theophilos replies smoothly, a hint of steel beneath the piety. Should its representation on earth be any less brilliant? It's a bold thing to say, a gambit. You hold your breath. Simeon looks up, and for the first time, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touches his lips. A fair point, Master. A fair point. He makes a note in his binder. Proceed. But remember the deadline. With a final, sweeping glance that seems to inventory every chunk of stone and every pot of pigment, the cartophylax and his retinue turn and depart, their footsteps fading back into the rhythm of the city. The workshop remains silent for a long moment after they've gone, the air slowly seeping back to normal. Some rumor is that some church officials, concerned with budgets, would insist on using gold-leafed glass tesserae only on the bottom layer, facing the mortar, with cheap clay on the visible surface, trusting that the thin layer of gold would shine through. It was a divine fraud, a heavenly economy. The master turns back to his work, picking up the sheet of gold glass. He doesn't address the interruption. He doesn't need to. The message is clear. You are servants of both God and the treasury. The work must be perfect, it must be doctrinally sound, and it must be done on time. The pressure, which you thought couldn't get any heavier, just did. You look at your mortar mix, and for a moment, it feels less like a building material and more like a ticking clock. The dust from the Kartoffelax's visit has settled, both literally and figuratively. The workshop has returned to its familiar, industrious hum, but a new tension underlies the sounds of labor. The Feast of the Transfiguration is a fixed point on the horizon, a deadline that now looms over every tapped tesserae. You are back at the stone-cutting bench, your martellina feeling heavier than before, your mind still replaying the official's scrutinizing gaze. It's in this state of preoccupied anxiety that the master summons you and a few other junior apprentices to the large, sand-filled tracing table at the center of the workshop. This, Theophilos says, his voice cutting through your fatigue, is not merely decoration. It is mathematics made visible. It is the geometry of heaven. He uses a sharpened stick to draw in the smooth sand. You see a circle. He sketches a perfect ring, a feat of effortless skill that would take you an hour to replicate. It is the unity of God, without beginning or end. He then inscribes a square within the circle. The earth. The 4 elements. The 4 evangelists. Then a triangle within the square. The Trinity. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He continues, his stick flying over the sand, creating a complex, interlocking pattern of circles, squares, and triangles. It is a labyrinth of meaning, every line, every intersection, every proportion heavy with symbolic weight. The proportions of the archangel's body, the span of his wings, the layout of the entire composition, all are derived from these sacred ratios. To deviate is not just an error in art, it is a theological misstep. He points up at the cartoon on the wall. The nimbus around his head. It is not a random halo. It is a perfect circle, constructed from the intersection of 2 equilateral triangles, the symbol of the Trinity. Its diameter dictates the length of his nose, the distance between his eyes, the placement of his hands. You stare, your mind reeling. You had seen the beauty, the color, the skill. You had never seen the invisible scaffolding of numbers and ratios holding it all together. The seemingly free-flowing robes are a complex series of calculated curves. The perspective of the heavenly city in the background is a masterclass in geometric foreshortening. Your task, he says, handing each of you a wax tablet and a stylus, is to deconstruct a pomegranate from the border. Find its circles. Find the squares that contain it. Find the triangles that define its internal chambers. Show me the geometry of resurrection. You sit on a low stool, tablet in your lap, and stare at the drawing on the wall. The plump, split fruit that had seemed so organic, so naturally flowing, now appears as a complex puzzle. You begin to sketch, your stylus making faint grooves in the wax. You try to find the primary circle that defines the fruit's outer shape. It's not easy. The pomegranate is slightly lopsided, more naturalistic than perfectly round. You realize this is part of the mastery, to use the strict, divine geometry as a foundation, and then to introduce slight, human imperfections to give it life. The chaos within the order, as the master had said about the tesserae. A mainstream historical fact that underpins this entire lesson. Byzantine architects and artists relied heavily on the geometric principles laid out by ancient Greek mathematicians like Euclid and Pythagoras, believing that mathematical harmony was a reflection of the divine mind. The great Hagia Sophia itself is a monument to this belief, its vast dome seemingly suspended from heaven by a complex web of geometric calculation. You are now learning the miniature version of that same cosmic principle. You finally sketch a circle that mostly fits the pomegranate. Then you try to find the square within it. Your lines are wobbly, your angles imprecise. You look over at Nicetas's tablet. His circle is perfect, his square already inscribed, and his lightly sketching the triangular divisions of the seeds with a confident hand. A flower of jealousy mixes with admiration. He just gets it. As you struggle with your clumsy geometry, is an old workshop legend about the secret of the 10th cube. It's said that in every truly great mosaic, the master would intentionally misplace one tesserae in every 100, breaking the perfect pattern. This single, deliberate flaw was a nod to the belief that only God could achieve perfection, and for a mortal to claim it would be the height of hubris. You wonder if the master will do that with the archangel, and if so, where he will hide the flaw. After what feels like an age, the master moves among you, examining your wax tablets. He pauses at Nicetas's, gives a grunt that might be approval, and moves on. He stops at yours. He looks at your shaky circle, your lopsided square. He says nothing for a long moment. Then he takes your stylus from your hand. His own hand, gnarled and scarred, moves with an astonishing gentleness. He corrects your lines, not by erasing them, but by showing you a new way to find the center point, a trick for sighting the angle of a square. The mind must see the truth before the hand can draw it, he says softly, his breath smelling of bread and dust. Do not draw what you see. Draw what you know to be there. The geometry is the truth. The fruit is merely its shadow. He moves on, leaving you with a corrected, beautiful geometric analysis of a pomegranate on your wax tablet. It's a revelation. The fruit is no longer just a fruit. It is a universe of meaning, a tiny, structured echo of the cosmic order you are helping to build on the wall. The weight of the deadline is still there, but now it's joined by a dawning sense of the immense, intellectual architecture underlying every single thing you do. You're not just cutting stones and mixing mud. You are a junior geometer of the divine. The intellectual revelation of sacred geometry is a cold comfort to the fire in your muscles. The afternoon sun slants through the high windows, casting long, distorted shadows of the scaffolding across the workshop floor. The knowledge of circles and ratios has been absorbed, the wax tablet set aside, and you have been returned to the physical world with a vengeance. Your body is now a living ledger, keeping a precise and painful account of the day's labors. It starts in your hands. The calluses you've built up over months, points of pride on your palms and fingers, have begun to protest. A fresh, hot blister has risen on the pad of your thumb where the Martellina's handle presses, a tiny, liquid-filled bubble of agony that boasts with a particularly forceful tap, leaving raw, stinging skin exposed. You wrap a scrap of dirty linen around it and keep going. The crack of the hammer now sends a jolt of pain shooting up your arm, a sharp reminder with every impact. Your shoulders are a landscape of knots, a dense, aching tapestry woven from the repetitive strain of hauling water, mixing mortar, and swinging the hammer. A deep, persistent throb has taken root at the base of your neck, tightening whenever you turn your head. Your lower back, from hunching over the cutting bench and the mortar trough, has settled into a solid, unyielding ache, a constant, grinding presence that makes you shift your weight from foot to foot, searching for a relief that never comes. Even your legs and feet, which you thought were just for standing, have joined the chorus of complaint. Your calves are tight, your soles tender from hours of standing on the hard, stone floor. There is no chair, no stool, no respite. You are a body in service to the wall, and the wall is a demanding, insatiable god. You glance around at the other apprentices. You are not alone in your silent suffering. Nicetas, for all his geometric genius, is flexing and clenching his drawing hand under the table, his fingers cramping. Plump Alexandros looks pale, his usual grumbling replaced by a weary, vacant stare as he endlessly turns the grinding wheel, sharpening tools. His tunic is dark with sweat around the collar and under his arms. The air in the workshop is thick and humid, heavy with the breath of 24 exhausted boys and men, the dust from their labors hanging in the sunbeams like a fine, glittering mist. The only ones who seem immune are the master and the senior apprentices like Demetrios. But you've learned to look closer. You see the way Demetrios rolls his shoulders slowly when he thinks no one is looking, a subtle, controlled movement to work out the stiffness. You see the master occasionally stretch his back, his hands pressing into his kidneys, his eyes closing for a fraction of a second. They are not immune, they are just better at hiding it. Their pain is an old, familiar companion, a ghost that haunts their bones, a price paid for their skill. You'd heard that some mosaicists, in the truly grand imperial workshops, would have slaves rub them down with a liniment made from willow bark and vinegar at the end of the day. Willow bark, you're told, can ease aches. You have no willow bark. You have only the hope of a bowl of lukewarm lentil stew and the oblivion of sleep. A mainstream historical reality you are living is the sheer physical toll of pre-industrial craftsmanship. There were no ergonomic tools, no safety goggles, no workers' compensation. A lifetime in a trade like this meant a body broken by 40, fingers gnarled with arthritis, lungs scarred by stone and plaster dust. The glorious art that tourists would one day marvel at was bought with the chronic pain of countless anonymous artisans. You are one of them. Your blisters and backaches are part of the unrecorded history of this mosaic. You are pulled from your grim thoughts by Leo, who thrusts a large, empty water skin into your arms. The well. We're running low. And be quick about it. The errand is both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because it means a few minutes outside the dust-choked workshop, a chance to straighten your screaming back fully. A curse because it means hauling a heavy, sloshing burden back up the hill from the cistern, a task that will demand everything from your aching shoulders and burning legs. You nod, too tired to speak, and shuffle towards the doorway. The sunlight in the courtyard is blinding after the dim interior, and the air, though still warm, feels clean and new in your lungs. You take a deep, grateful breath, feeling your ribs expand. For a moment, you just stand there, eyes closed, face turned to the sky, a statue of exhaustion soaking up a moment of peace. The pain doesn't leave, but it recedes, just a little, reminding you that there is a world outside the workshop, a world where bodies are not just tools. But you can't stay here. The water won't fetch itself. You trudge towards the well, your body a collection of protests, each step a negotiation between willpower and weariness. The walk to the well is a slow, painful pilgrimage. Each step sends a fresh jolt from your sore feet up through your complaining knees and into the solid ache of your lower back. The heavy, empty water skin draped over your shoulder feels like a leaden yoke. The courtyard, usually just a space to cross, now seems vast, its cobblestones uneven and treacherous. You reach the well, its familiar stone rim cool and smooth under your raw hands. The simple act of lowering the bucket is a trial, the rope abrasive against your boust blister. You haul it up, arm muscles trembling, the water sloshing heavily, and pour the cold, clear liquid into the skin. The weight doubles, then triples. You take a moment, leaning against the well, trying to summon the strength for the return journey. It's then that you notice it. You've leaned your hand against a particular stone in the well's coping, one that is slightly smoother, slightly more worn than its neighbors. And there, almost invisible unless the light hits it just right, is a series of scratches. You lean closer, your breath catching. It's not random weathering. It's a tiny, crudely carved image. A fish. Next to it, a series of letters in Greek. Nikephoros made this. Nikephoros. You've never heard the name. He must be long gone, a ghost of apprentices past. But he was here. He stood at this same well, his body just as tired, his hands just as sore, and he left a mark. A tiny, secret rebellion against the anonymity of his toil. He didn't sign the mosaic, he never would have been allowed to. But he signed the well, a piece of the workshop's infrastructure, a place everyone touches but no one sees. He made this. Not the well, you realize, but the mark. His existence. The pain in your body momentarily forgotten, you run your fingertips over the faint grooves. The fish, an ancient Christian symbol, a secret sign of faith and identity. And his name. He was real. He hurt. He hoped. He wanted to be remembered. A wave of connection, profound and startling, washes over you. You are not the first to feel this way. You are part of a long, invisible chain of boys who have passed through this workshop, their sweat and blood and boredom soaked into its very stones. Nikephoros is your silent comrade, separated by years, united by blisters. You heft the full water skin, the weight somehow feeling different now. It's not just a burden, it's a link. You carry it back into the workshop, your eyes now newly attuned to the space. As you pour the water into the large storage jar, you let your gaze wander over the wooden beams of the ceiling, the stone blocks of the walls, the legs of the workbenches. Are there other secrets? Other messages from the departed? Later, sent to fetch a fresh lump of lime from the storage alcove, you brush against the back of a shelf and feel more roughness. In the flickering light from the doorway, you see another scratch, this one just a simple, stick figure man holding a hammer. No name this time, just an image. A statement, I was a cutter. Archaeologists sometimes find these builders' marks or personal graffiti in the most unexpected places in ancient structures, on the backs of stones, in hidden conduits, under floorboards. They are the whispers of the workforce, the human signature on the monolithic achievements of history. You are now a part of that secret tradition. A mainstream historical fact that gives Nikephoros' act deeper meaning. We know the names of very few artists and artisans from the Byzantine era, especially from its earlier centuries. The culture valued the collective, the imperial or religious patron, not the individual craftsman. Their identities were subsumed into the glory of God and the emperor. Finding a personal signature like this is incredibly rare and precious. It's a crack in the historical record, a voice fighting its way out of the silence. You don't dare add your own mark. Not yet. That would be tempting fate. But the knowledge that it's there, that Nikephoros asserted his existence, changes something fundamental in you. The grind isn't just a path to becoming a master. It's a rite of passage you share with a host of ghosts. The pain in your hands is the same pain Nikephoros felt. The longing for something permanent, for a name, is the same. You look at the growing mosaic on the wall, this great, collaborative effort to capture the divine, and then you think of the tiny, hidden fish by the well, a solitary effort to capture the self. Both, in their own way, are a fight against oblivion. You return to your bench, the image of the fish burned into your mind. The work is still hard, your body still screams, but you feel a little less alone. You have a secret now. A friend in the past. The memory of the hidden fish is a cool, secret stone in your pocket, a touchstone against the grinding fatigue. The afternoon light has begun to mellow, softening from a harsh white glare to a deep, honeyed gold that slants through the high windows of the workshop. It is in this transformed light that the next, most magical phase of the work begins. The master claps his hands twice, a sharp signal that brings a hush. The gold is all he says, and the word hangs in the air, heavier than any stone. From a locked, iron-banded chest that sits in the corner, a chest you have seen but never been allowed to approach, the master himself retrieves the treasure. He carries a small, thick wooden panel, and on it are rows of tesserae that seem to be made of captured sunlight. These are the gold smalti. They are not solid gold, of course, that would be impossibly soft and expensive. Instead, they are crafted by sandwiching a paper-thin sheet of beaten gold leaf between a piece of blown glass and a backing of clear glass, fused together in a kiln. The result is a tesserae that glows with an internal, liquid fire. The master hands the panel to Demetrios, who ascends the scaffolding to the highest part of the apse, the background of the heavenly firmament behind the archangel's wings. You and the other junior apprentices are tasked with a new, nerve-wracking duty. You are the gold runners. You stand at the base of the scaffolding, and a senior apprentice above calls down for a specific type of gold. There are different kinds, you learn. Pale gold for the outer aura, comes the call. Deep gold, the Egyptian, for the inner glow. You are handed a small, soft leather pouch. Inside are a dozen of the pale gold tesserae. They are warm to the touch, as if they've absorbed the sun's energy. They are also terrifyingly fragile. A single drop, a clumsy squeeze, and the delicate glass sandwich could shatter, ruining the precious gold leaf inside. You feel the weight of the workshop's entire budget in your palm. You climb the ladder slowly, carefully, one hand gripping the rung, the other cradling the pouch against your chest as if it were a wounded bird. You reach the platform where Demetrios is working. The view from up here is dizzying. The entire workshop spreads out below you, a miniature world of busy ants. The half-finished archangel is immense, his face a serene mask of cobalt and cream tesserae, his eyes seeming to follow you. Demetrios takes the pouch from you without a word, his focus absolute. He selects a tesserae with his tweezers. He doesn't dip it in the mortar bed. Instead, he uses a tiny brush to apply the thinnest layer of the sticky bedding mix directly to its back. Then, he presses it into the wall. The effect is instantaneous and breathtaking. The small, dull grey area of fresh plaster around it seems to vanish, and the tesserae appears to float, a window into a realm of pure, divine light. It doesn't reflect the light like the marble and colored glass, it generates it. Thock. The soft tap of the leather mallet sets it for eternity. He places another, and then another. Slowly, a patch of heaven begins to bloom behind the archangel's head, a radiance that seems to emanate from within the wall itself. You are sent down for more, this time the deep Egyptian gold, which has a richer, almost orange hue. As you make your second ascent, you see the transformation taking hold. The honeyed afternoon light from the window is now striking the newly set gold tesserae. They ignite. The entire apse seems to shimmer, the light dancing and moving as if alive. The archangel is no longer a static image being built. He is being born into a corona of glory. The sheer, overwhelming beauty of it catches in your throat. This is why you endure the dust, the ache, the master's scrutiny. For this. To help build a piece of heaven. A mainstream historical fact that makes the moment even more potent. The gold glass used in these tesserae was a state-controlled industry at times, its production a closely guarded secret. The specific recipe for the glass, the thickness of the gold leaf, the temperature of the kiln, all of it contributed to the unique, luminous quality that defines Byzantine mosaics and separates them from all other traditions. You are handling the pinnacle of your empire's artistic and technological achievement. The very best setters could angle the gold tesserae so precisely that they would catch the light from the altar candles during evening services, making the entire mosaic appear to flicker and breathe with a life of its own, as if the Holy Spirit itself were moving across the wall. It was a form of sacred stagecraft, a divine special effect. You descend the ladder for the last time, your task as a gold runner complete. You stand on the solid floor again, looking up. The section Demetrios has completed glows with an unearthly radiance, a promise of the splendor to come. The cartophylax's deadline, your aching body, the hidden fish by the well, all of it recedes for a moment in the face of this sheer, dazzling beauty. You have helped, in your small way, to trap light inside the wall. You have touched gold. And for the rest of the day, no matter how menial your next task, your fingertips feel like they are still glowing. The alchemy of the gold has left a permanent shimmer on your vision, a sense of awe that even the grunt work that follows cannot completely erase. You've been put back on mortar duty, mixing a large batch for tomorrow's work, your arms once again burning with the familiar, grueling strain. It's during this monotonous labor that Leo seeks you out, his expression as close to animated as it ever gets. You. And you, he says, pointing to you and Niketas. The master needs more lapis lazuli. The raw chunks, not the powder. The supplier's shop is by the harbor of Sofia. You know the way. You both nod, trying to hide your excitement. A trip outside the workshop walls is a rare gift, a stolen slice of freedom. This isn't a quick errand to the well. This is a journey into the beating heart of the city. You wipe your hands hastily on your tunics, leaving gray smears on the coarse wool. The master gives you a small, heavy leather purse from his belt. You feel the weight of the coins inside, more money than you will see in a year of apprenticeship. Go directly there and back, he instructs, his flinty eyes locking with yours. No dawdling. The city is distracting. You nod solemnly, the weight of the responsibility settling on your shoulders alongside the thrill. You and Niketas push open the heavy wooden door of the workshop and step out into the narrow, shadowed street. After the dim, dusty interior, the world outside is a riot of sound, color, and smell. It's overwhelming, like being born a second time. You are in the city of 7 hills, the new Rome, the heart of the world. The street is a cramped canyon, the buildings leaning so close together they almost kiss at the top, blotting out the sky. Lines of laundry crisscross overhead, fluttering like faded prayer flags. The air, which you thought would be fresh, is thick and complex, a loud perfume of baking bread, frying fish, exotic spices, horse dung, sewage, and the salty tang of the sea. It's the smell of 100,000 people living on top of one another. You and Niketas join the river of humanity flowing downhill towards the sea. A wealthy matron in a fine silk mephorion is carried past on a litter, her servants clearing a path. A water seller clangs his bell, his goatskin bag sloshing. A priest with a magnificent beard strides purposefully, his face set in a frown. You pass a smithy, the roar of the bellows and the clang of hammer on iron a familiar, comforting echo of your own workshop. Then the scent changes to spices, cinnamon, pepper, cloves. As you pass a merchant stall, the owner haggling loudly with a Varangian guardsman, his accent strange, his beard braided. You glimpse a major thoroughfare, the Mise, a grand processional street lined with colonnades and bustling with even more intense life. You can just see the tip of the Great Milion, the golden milestone from which all distances in the empire are measured. But you don't go that way. You follow a narrower, steeper street that winds down towards the water. The sound of gulls grows louder, and the smell of the sea begins to dominate. You finally reach the harbor of Sofia, a smaller, more specialized port than the great Theodosian harbor. It's a forest of masts, the ships looking impossibly tall and complex up close. Their hulls are stained from long journeys, their sails patched. You hear a dozen different languages shouted by sailors unloading cargo. Bales of silk, amphorae of wine and oil, blocks of pristine white marble. This is where the wealth of the empire flows in, the raw materials for its glory. You find the supplier's shop, a dark, cave-like space tucked between a chandler and a sailmaker. Inside, it's a geologist's dream. Baskets and shelves are filled with raw minerals. Malachite like petrified green velvet, red cinnabar like frozen blood, yellow ochre in dusty lumps, and the deep, celestial blue lapis lazuli you've come for. The supplier, a wiry man with eyes that have squinted at too many gems, weighs out the chunks of lapis, the price exorbitant. You hand over the coins from the purse, your hand trembling slightly. This small bag of blue rock represents months of your workshop's income. As you turn to leave, your package secure, you see a commotion near the docks. A new ship has arrived, its sails tattered. The people disembarking are not merchants or sailors, but families, their faces gaunt, their clothes ragged. They carry their possessions in bundles on their backs. Their eyes are hollow with a loss you cannot comprehend. A whisper runs through the crowd on the dock, Ansh. They say Ansh has fallen. The words mean little to you geopolitically, but the human misery is a stark, cold splash of reality after the insulated world of the workshop. A shadow on the city, a reminder that the empire's borders are not secure, that the world beyond these walls is one of war and desperation. You and Niketas look at each other, the thrill of the errand gone. You clutch the lapis lazuli tighter. Suddenly, the obsession with the perfect blue for the virgin's robe feels both incredibly important and utterly trivial. You have seen the city, in all its vibrant, stinking, glorious, and fearful life. You have a new understanding of what you are building your piece of heaven for, and what it is meant to protect against. The walk back to the workshop is silent, and much, much slower. The vibrant, chaotic energy of the city feels like a dream, a distant echo muffled by the workshop's thick walls and the pervasive smell of dust and lime. The grim news from Ansh is a whispered secret among the apprentices, a dark undercurrent beneath the usual sounds of labor, but there is no time to dwell on distant wars. The master's deadline is a far more immediate and personal pressure. Upon your return with the lapis lazuli, you are not sent back to the mortar or the cutting bench. Instead, you are directed to the pigment grinder, the alchemist's station at the very back of the workshop. This is where raw material is transformed into potential. An enormous, bowl-shaped stone mortar sits on the floor, its interior scarred and stained from decades, perhaps centuries, of use. A heavy, stone pestle, taller than you are, is suspended from a wooden frame, allowing it to be rocked back and forth with a grinding, circular motion. Your job, shared with the perpetually grumbling Alexandros, is to turn the chunks of raw lapis lazuli you just carried from the port into the finest, most brilliant ultramarine powder imaginable. It's not just about crushing it, Alexandros mumbles, his face already sheened with sweat as he heaves against the pestle. You have to love it. You have to crush it with feeling. Resentment makes a coarse, gritty powder. Despair makes it dull. You have to grind with joy, or the blue will be sad. He says this with utter seriousness, despite his usual cynical demeanor. It's an old workshop joke, but like all the best jokes, it contains a kernel of truth. You take your turn at the pestle, adding your strength to the rhythmic, crushing dance. The initial chunks of lapis, with their dull, dark blue exteriors and brilliant, gold-flecked interiors, are tough. The first stage is loud, a violent crunching and cracking that sends sharp blue shards skittering across the floor. You sweep these up and toss them back in. Nothing is wasted. Slowly, the large chunks become coarse gravel, then a coarse sand. This is where the real work begins. The grinding becomes slower, more deliberate, a patient, back-and-forth rocking that reduces the blue sand to a finer and finer powder. It is brutally physical, a test of endurance that makes your mortar mixing seem like child's play. Every muscle in your core, your back, your legs, is engaged in this monotonous, crushing sway. After what feels like an hour, your shift is over, and Alexandros takes over again. Your task now is the sifting. You scoop the finely ground powder into a series of increasingly delicate silk sieves, shaking them over a large piece of parchment. The finest, most precious powder, the true ultramarine, falls through last, a pile of pigment so vibrant it seems to glow with a light of its own. The slightly coarser grades will be used for underpainting or less important areas. The master himself comes over to inspect the results, dipping his finger into the pile of ultramarine and rubbing it on a white tile. He nods, once. For the Virgin's mantle. It is acceptable. This is the goal. This pile of blue dust, wrested from the stone by your own exhausting labor, will one day be mixed with glass and fired in a kiln to become the smalty for the most important figure in the chapel after Christ himself. You have participated in the very beginning of its journey. A mainstream historical fact, ultramarine blue, derived from lapis lazuli, was indeed one of the most expensive pigments in the world, more costly than gold because its only source was a single remote region in what is now Afghanistan. The cost of the pile of powder on that parchment was astronomical, a testament to the patron's wealth and the theological importance of the color blue in representing the divine and the human nature of the Virgin. But the work isn't done. The master points to another, smaller mortar. The madder root, he says. For the pink of the angel's lips. A gentle touch. You are not grinding bones. You move to the smaller station, where the process is repeated with dried madder root, which will yield a soft, organic pink. Some manuals suggested grinding certain pigments, like this madder root, not with water, but with egg yolk or fig milk as a binder, right here in the mortar, creating the paint directly. In your workshop, however, you are creating pure pigment for glass making. Still, you can't help but imagine the master artists of the illuminated manuscripts next door, doing just that, their alchemy as delicate as yours is brute force. As you rock the smaller pestle, the earthy, slightly bitter smell of the crushed madder root filling your nostrils, you think about the chain of creation. You cut the stone, you mix the mortar, you placed a single tesserae, and now you are grinding the very color that will define a holy face. You are not at the top of this pyramid, far from it, but you are embedded within it, a vital, if anonymous, cell in a great, artistic body. The news from Ansh, the suffering of the refugees, the bustling, chaotic city, it all feels a world away. Here, there is only the grind, the sift, and the slow, patient accumulation of beauty, one back-breaking sway of the pestle at a time. The deep, resonant ache of grinding pigment has settled into your bones, a permanent companion to the sharper pains in your hands and back. The workshop is bathed in the long, slanting light of late afternoon, the kind of light that tones the ever-present dust into a swirling, golden mist. The initial, frantic energy of the day has given way to a slower, more deliberate pace. The senior apprentices on the scaffolding work with a quiet focus, their movements economical, preserving their strength for the final hours. The tick, tick, tick of their hammers is slower now, more spaced out, each tap considered. You have been given a task that requires more sitting than standing, a small mercy your body accepts with gratitude. You are at a low bench, a pile of discarded, broken tesserae before you. The flawed smalty, the miscut marbles, the shattered gold glass from a clumsy moment. Your job is to sort them by color and size into different clay pots. These will be used for the opus sectile floors, crushed for terrazzo, or melted down for new glass. There is no waste. The master's mantra echoes in this simple, repetitive chore. As you sort, your mind wanders, unspooling the threads of the day. The dawn summons feels like a week ago. You think of the hidden fish by the well, Nikephoros' silent shout into the future. You think of the geometry lesson, the invisible architecture holding up the beauty. You think of the terrifying, exhilarating moment of placing your first tesserae, and the subsequent, crushing weight of the gold runner's responsibility. The journey to the port, the vibrant, stinking city, and the haunted eyes of the refugees from a fallen city flash before your mind's eye, a stark reminder of the fragile world beyond these walls. A soft conversation drifts over from the scaffold, where Demetrios and the master are examining the day's progress on the archangel's face. The policy of appeasement is a sieve for holding water. The master murmurs, his voice too low for anyone but you, directly below, to hear. They buy 1 year of peace with 10 years of war. The treasury bleeds gold to the barbarians, and for what? So they can return with sharper swords and hungrier armies. He is not talking about art. He is talking about the rumors, the news you brought back from the harbor. The shadow on the city is being discussed in hushed tones everywhere, even here, in this sanctuary of divine creation. The emperor is wise, master, Demetrios replies, his voice cautious. He plays a long game. The board is rotting, Demetrios, Theophilos counters, a rare note of bitterness in his voice. And the pieces are weary. Historians still argue whether the common artisan of Byzantium was deeply engaged in the political and military dramas of the empire or whether their world was largely confined to their trade and their faith. In this moment, listening to the master, you know the answer. The taxes that pay for your lapis lazuli, the safety of the trade routes that bring it, the very walls that protect your workshop, all are tied to the distant, messy business of empires and armies. You look down at the broken tesserae in your hand, a piece of emerald green glass with a jagged edge. It failed to become part of a saint's robe. It is flawed, imperfect. Yet here it is, being saved, its purpose shifted, not abandoned. You think of the empire, of the refugees, of the master's quiet despair. Is the empire a flawed tessera? Can its purpose be shifted, or is it destined for the crusher? Something old Giorgio said once when he'd had too much wine. The only thing truly built to last in this city is the plumbing. Philosophers argue, emperors fall, churches burn, but the water always finds a way. You find a strange comfort in that. The mundane, enduring infrastructure outlasting the glorious, fragile achievements built upon it. The light continues to fade. Leo begins to make the rounds, signaling the start of the cleanup. The setters carefully cover their fresh work with damp cloths to keep the mortar from setting too quickly overnight. The tools are cleaned and put away. The pots of pigment are sealed. The precious gold tesserae are returned to their locked chest. The workshop begins to tidy itself for the night, the day's creative chaos being reined in, made orderly. You finish sorting your last pot of broken tiles, your fingers numb and dusty. The immense, half-finished archangel seems to watch over the quieting room, his face serene, his golden aura dimmed in the twilight of the workshop. He is a promise of order and beauty in a world that feels increasingly chaotic. For now, that has to be enough. The final bell rings, a deep, resonant bronze tone that seems to vibrate in the very dust motes dancing in the sunset-lit air. The sound is not one of dismissal, but of release. A collective, weary sigh seems to pass through the workshop. The last tap of a hammer falls silent. The last brush is cleaned. The last pot is sealed. The day's labor, a marathon of muscle and mind, is over. You help with the final tidying, moving with the slow, deliberate economy of motion you've learned from the seniors. You sweep your own area, the pile of stone chips and glass dust, the physical evidence of your day's effort, into a corner to be dealt with tomorrow. You cover the mortar trough with a damp cloth. You place your tools, your martellina, your trowel, neatly in your assigned spot on the rack. These small rituals are as much a part of the day as the work itself, a way of putting the creative fury to bed. One by one, the apprentices file out into the courtyard. The sky above is a vast, deepening dome of violet and rose, the first bold stars pricking through the fading light. The air is cool now, a blessing on your sweat-damp skin. You join the line at the well once more, but this time it's different. There's no urgency. The water you splash on your face and arms is for cleansing, not for waking. It washes away the worst of the dust, leaving your skin clean but still etched with the grime that has settled deep into your pores, the permanent tattoo of your trade. Dinner is a silent affair. You sit on a low wall in the courtyard with a wooden bowl of lentil and barley stew, a thick, hearty sludge that you eat with a piece of the same coarse bread you had for breakfast. It's flavorless, practical fuel, but tonight it tastes like ambrosia. Your body is a hollow vessel, and you shovel the food in, feeling the warmth spread through your core. You drink deeply from a ladle of water, the cold liquid a balm to your parched throat. No one speaks much. There are no jokes, no arguments. There is only the sound of chewing, of swallowing, of exhaustion. After eating, you have a sliver of time to yourself before the light fails completely and you are sent to your cell. You find a quiet corner of the courtyard, away from the others, and lean against the cool stone wall, sliding down to sit on the ground. You look up at the workshop from the outside. In the twilight, it's just a large, plain building, its windows dark. There is no hint of the glory being born within, no shimmer of gold, no flash of blue. It is a fortress of patience. You look down at your hands, resting on your knees. In the dim light, you can see the new, raw patch where the blister burst, the dark lines of dirt permanently etched into the cracks of your knuckles, the slight, persistent tremor from a day of vibration and strain. These hands sorted blue glass, mixed mortar, cut stone, carried gold, and ground lapis lazuli. They placed a single, perfect red seed into the body of a holy fruit. They are the hands of an apprentice. They are tired, they are damaged, but they are capable. They have, in their small, imperfect way, helped build something that will last. You think of Nikephoros and his fish. You think of the master's flinty gaze and his unexpected moment of guidance. You think of the terrifying, beautiful chaos of the city and the serene, ordered geometry of the mosaic. The day has been a universe of experiences, compressed into the space between one dawn and one dusk. You have been bored, pained, exhilarated, humbled, and awestruck. You have been nobody, and you have been a vital part of something eternal. A final, deep chime signals it is time to retire. You push yourself to your feet, your body protesting one last time. You trudge towards your small, dark cell, the promise of your straw-filled cot an almost unimaginable luxury. You push the door open. The room is exactly as you left it, a tiny, Spartan space that smells of old plaster and yourself. You don't even bother to take off your tunic. You simply collapse onto the cot, the straw crunching a familiar welcome. The last thing you feel, as sleep pulls you under like a swift, dark tide, is not the ache in your muscles or the sting in your hands, but a profound, quiet sense of place. You are here. You are part of this. You are a Byzantine Mosaicist's apprentice. And tomorrow, the dawn summons will come again. And so, as the final light fades from the workshop courtyard and the last apprentice finds their rest, we too must leave this world of dust and divine light. The relentless cycle of labor and learning, of aching muscles and moments of breathtaking beauty, settles into the quiet of the Byzantine night. The city of Constantinople hums its own lullaby beyond the walls, a distant melody of waves and whispers, while inside, the half-formed saints and angels wait patiently in the dark for the sun to return and for the hands of their creators to continue their work. Remember the weight of the hammer, the cool touch of the marble, the blinding flash of gold. Remember that the grandest tapestries of history are woven by countless, nameless hands, each one contributing a single, vital thread to a story much larger than themselves. Your journey into this distant day is complete, the sounds of the workshop fading now, replaced only by the slow, steady rhythm of your own breath, easing you into a deep and well-earned rest. Let the stillness of the ancient night settle around you, a soft blanket of centuries, comforting and deep.